So this video we're going to show how to build a DIY lacrosse rebounder. I found that the ones that have nets, they just break over time. And the one that was really solid, this one throws it back a lot harder too. So how'd I do it? So we can look at the frame here. I just used treated 2x2s, and these are about 6.5 feet tall. This one, my kid's 12 years old, so 12.5 or 6.5 feet tall on each of them. And you can see that there's 4 if we look at the back of it here, and they're actually the same length. And we'll look at how we install them first. So materials, you could rip down some 2x4s. I just got 2x2s, and they're about 6.5 feet tall each. So there's 4 of those. And you also want 2 or 3 supports in the back like we see here. This is really important. It'll make sure that they don't wobble too much. If you don't have those, it's going to have irregular bounce. So really trying to make just a solid wall here. You're also going to want, I used 3/8 inch toggle bolts or through bolts on this one, and I put a washer in between here, another washer on the side here, and you can kind of double up the bolts. I use 3/8 galvanized with those. I like the ones that are circular here on the end, and they have a square on the inside of this. It really holds it nicely in the wood when it articulates back and forth. I probably overbuilt it, but I also had a total of 80, just use deck screws on this one. Ideally, you'd want something that's gonna go a little bit further than this. You can see those just went through about that far. Ideally, you want them about like this. If they poke out the back, no problem. You just wanna bang them in or maybe hammer it there. What's important when you put this together is to pre-drill your holes. And you also want, I have a countersink bit, so I drilled out the countersink. That way you want this really smooth so the ball doesn't bounce off of it irregular. So what did I use for the boards? You can see I have 2 different leftover deck board size. These are the 5/4 Trex type ones. So they actually end up being almost exactly 1 inch here, plus the 2x2, you got about 2.5 inches total there. You could use cedar or anything else that's a nice exterior deck board. What we're really looking for is to make sure that you have a nice flat piece here, because if there's too much of a lip, if it's not very flat, the ball's going to bounce off and it's going to be irregular. So I decided to use 8 of these. They're about 5 inches each. This particular one is 44 inches across and about the same up and down. You could make it bigger or smaller based on however you want to do it. So in terms of the back, it's important, I found after playing with this a little bit, to put a little brace on the bottom. I just use plywood. You can use whatever you want. But the 2x2s actually hold it up really nicely. And if we look at how you do this, I pre-drilled this. I just used a 3/8 inch drill, so drilled all the way through for this one. And it's important so it'll articulate back and forth. You don't want this to be too tall here. And you want to make sure that you round off. I just use a jigsaw here. That way it'll turn without bumping into the board. So that's it. It took me just a little bit of time. If you do use the composite deck boards, I just cut it with a regular saw blade. You can buy a fancy expensive one if you're doing a whole deck project, but you don't really need to do that on this one. So it probably took a total of 2 hours or so, and as you can see, it's really solid. It comes back really quickly when you throw it, about as hard as you throw it in there, and turned out really nicely.